Today's video is sponsored by Native Sons Goods, makers of the highest quality woven guitar, bag, and camera straps you'll ever see. Native Sons straps are handmade one at a time in the USA with unparalleled love and care. Click the link in the description to check out their new expanded lineup featuring all new 3-inch guitar straps. And remember, when you support my sponsor, you support this channel, and I sure appreciate it. Hey, how's it going, all you young dudes? Brad the Guitologist here with another exciting episode for you. In this episode, I've got this chassis from this 1971 Marshall model 1959 Super Lead back out on the desk, and I'm going to make one last video of this. I spoke to the customer and said, hey, I could throw a master volume in this thing if you want me to do that. And what I thought I might do is just kind of talk about a couple of the different master volumes that are out there, a couple of the different designs, talk a little bit about what they do, what parts they replace, where they came from. We might talk a little bit about who designed them. Yeah, let's take a look, and like I said, we'll see the different options we have available for master volumes, and we'll choose the best one I think that will work best for our purposes here. And yeah, so if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, stick around. Okay, so the first thing I thought we might do is talk about what a master volume is and why you need one in an amp like this. There are two different types of overdrive that you can get. You can get preamp overdrive, which involves the first few gain stages of the amp that are called the preamp section. That's pretty much everything from here over. Then you have a phase inverter, and then you have the output section. And the thing is, there's only one volume for each channel on this, and the volume here is one of the volumes right here, this 1 meg. And here is the volume for the other channel right here, this 1 meg. And as you can see, both of these volume pots come after the first gain stage. So for this channel right here, these two inputs, they go into this gain stage here on this side of this tube. They come out and the signal passes through this 0.022 capacitor and then into this 1 meg pot that acts as the volume control for this first channel. And then this second side over here inputs, it goes over here and then it comes out and comes up to here and through this 0.0022 capacitor over to this volume control. And then after that, there's no volume control. Then you have another gain stage here, and then that comes out and then goes to this stage here, which is a cathode follower stage. A cathode follower is usually, it doesn't offer you a whole lot of gain for this particular stage, but what it does do is it gives you a lot of current that can push through signal through a tone stack, and that's what we have here after this is the tone stack. So you have your treble, your middle, and your bass controls here. After that, there is no second gain control, no second volume control. It just goes directly into the phase inverter and then out to the output. And the thing is, a lot of people like to have that second master volume control because it allows you more flexibility. It allows you to actually turn up the volume for this preamp stage and get the crunch and overdrive out of the preamp, and then independently you can control the volume of the output stage, and that allows you to turn the thing down and still get somewhat of the same sort of overdrive tone. Now it's not going to be exactly the same, but it'll get you damn close, especially in circuits like this. A lot of the Marshall tone, a lot of the character of the amplifier does come from the preamp stages. You can turn just about any amplifier into something that sounds very Marshall-esque by changing the way that the tone stack is wired, and also changing in particular the first preamp stage. In later Marshall amplifiers, they came stock with a master volume. There are two different places to put a master volume in a typical guitar amp: before or after the phase inverter. A master placed before the phase inverter will look very much like the existing volume controls in the amplifier, just later in the signal path. A post-phase inverter master volume will include the gain of the phase inverter itself when adjusting the preamp volume, resulting in more overdrive at lower volumes. Okay, what we have here is a well-known book or paper written by Ken Fischer of Trainwreck Amplifiers. Ken Fischer passed away a while back, but before he passed away, he was very well regarded in the amp community. He built Trainwreck amplifiers, which now are some of the most highly sought-after amplifiers in the world, and they fetch big prices. This version of the Trainwreck Pages, this print version that I have, is published in this book, A Desktop Reference of Hip Vintage Guitar Amplifiers by Gerald Weber. You can actually find this book. There are links in the description. If you scroll down in the description under books, you will find links to where you can get one of these. You can also find these online as well, and I'll put links to those if you'd rather just have them in like PDF form. But it's nice to have a printed version. Anyway, if we flip over here at where he talks about master volume mods for Marshalls. He doesn't get too much into the technical side of things, but he does talk about some of the differences of these different types. Here he describes 4 main types of master volumes, and type 1, he says, uses a double 1 meg audio taper pot. It's the type used in certain old Marshall combos and certain other Marshall amps as a factory master volume. However, this type of master volume has the unfortunate side effects of limiting the quality of the amplifier's original fully cranked sound. If it is important to maintain the option of producing the original sound of the Marshall on 10, this mod will not achieve your goals. It's probably important to note here that what he means by cranked to 10, he's talking about having the output tubes cranked all the way to 10, and that's going to give you the maximum amount of clean headroom for the amp, so you'll be able to turn the amp up loud and clean. So he's not really talking about crunch tones right there. When he talks about type 2 and 3, these both will allow the amp to return to its original fully cranked sound with the volume set to 10. So that might be something that is desirable. So it's, there's going to be no way that somebody can come back and say, hey, you screwed up this amp because it can no longer go to 10 and it no longer sounds the same on 10 as it would have originally. So type 2 and 3 would be desirable for that reason. Type 1, we will put on the back burner for now. There is a type 4 master volume that he talks about, and it says here that this master volume is used on later Marshall amps. It tends to produce a more modern heavy metal, hardcore sound with the addition of an outboard overdrive unit, channel jumping on the 4 input Marshalls, or the actual installation of an additional preamp stage. It will tend to produce the most distortion. We are not going to add an additional preamp stage, obviously, to this vintage Marshall amplifier. I'm not going to mod it quite that much, although we do have a spot over here where we could add another valve. If we wanted to remove this little plate, we could add a couple of gain stages on this amp if we wanted to, but that's not something we are going to do. I'm not going to go modding this amp quite that much, being a collectible amp and all. And the thing that's also something of note, the thing that we're planning on doing here, adding this master volume, is not something that is unreversible. This will be a fully reversible mod. If somebody wants to come in here and put this back to stock, it will not be difficult to do, and it'll probably take them a competent tech under an hour to do. But yeah, so since we're not going to be adding a gain stage, and we're not going to internally jumper those 4 inputs on this thing, it's looking like our best options are going to be for type 2 or type 3. So let's check out the 4 types in more detail. So if we flip over here where he talks about these, let's just look at master volume type 1 first. What we can see here is that the normal link between these coupling capacitors and the bias resistors, which are right here, have been severed. So these capacitors no longer go all the way to these resistors. So you'd have to come up with some kind of solution to tie these onto a lead, and then they need to be tied over to the leg of one half of a dual gang 1 meg pot. The same thing happens over here. The connection between the coupling capacitor and the bias resistor has been severed, and the signal lead is now coming over here to the other side of this dual gang pot, to this leg. And then you have a situation coming off the wiper where you have a 0.1 microfarad capacitor where the signal passes through in order to get over here and then eventually onto the output. Now, the reason they have these capacitors right here is to block the DC that's going to be present here and here. There's going to be about probably negative 45 volts or so, somewhere along in there, present at these two positions. And they use this 0.1 microfarad capacitor to keep that voltage from backing up onto this pot and making the pot sound scratchy when you move it. The problem with that, though, is, as you can see, the audio that's coming through here comes through this pot, and it comes out of the pot and then through this 0.1 microfarad capacitor. So all of your audio is actually being filtered by a 0.1 microfarad capacitor, which is going to change the tone somewhat when it goes to the output. Now, if you don't want this situation where you have to have a capacitor here, and they're using a relatively large value of 0.1 instead of like a 0.047 or a 0.00 something, or, you know, they're using a fairly large capacitor so that it kind of captures more of the overall tone and sends all of those frequencies through rather than blocking some of those frequencies. Because the larger capacitor that you use, it would tend to give you more bass, essentially. If we look at the next page, we can see here the Master Volume Type 2. And this is a Master Volume type that was, I think, pioneered by Ken Fischer himself. So this is something that he kind of came up with as a solution. You can see here that the two bias resistors are entirely gone, and they used to go from here to here. So what we have instead is a situation where the bias feed comes in. So this is your negative bias voltage. So it's just going right onto the pot. He just doesn't seem to care at all about the fact that that voltage is going onto the pot, and he's using this dual gang pot setup, and here he's using a 100K linear pot for this purpose. He's using this in place of the bias resistors. He doesn't care about the whoosh 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 when you turn the knob. It's just, it is going to be there on this type of Master Volume. The other thing too is, as you'll notice, our version excuse me, our version of the Marshall is the 1959 circuit, and then in this version we have 220K resistors in this position, and he has 100K linear here, so it'd probably be better to even replace these instead with a 250K linear dual gang pot rather than this 100K for our particular application here. It would be closer to the original 220K resistors. Then you would have to rebias the amplifier as well when you change that. If you look over here, we'll see Type 3 Master Volume, and this one is probably the simplest one in terms of how it works, and it's also the simplest one to install. You can just see nothing has been changed whatsoever with the exception of 2 leads and a single 1 meg audio taper potentiometer. That's it. You just tie in one of the leads here to the leg of this pot. You tie in the other lead over here to the wiper of the pot, and when you move this pot up and down, what you're doing is you're basically taking some of the signal that's over here on this side that's been phase inverted from this side, because this is post-phase inverter, remember. So this side is going to be one half of the wave signal, and this other half is going to be the other portion of the sine wave. So what happens when you blend these two is that they cancel each other out. And that is the idea behind this style of Master Volume. There is a fourth style of Master Volume that's discussed in the Trainwreck Pages, but this type of Master Volume is actually a pre-phase inverter Master Volume, and this one is going to be tied in with the treble control. So it's going to go pre-phase inverter, and it's also going to be, we'll take a look where it would go in the circuit here on our 1959 that we're working on. It would be right over here. So it would be right here before the phase inverter. So if we want a situation where our amplifier is going to have the best chance of having good breakup, and it's going to have the best chance of not being different than the amplifier's original tone, Probably the best one to use and the simplest one to use is going to be the Master Volume Type 3, this guy right here, and it also has the added benefit of being the easiest to install. Now each one of these is going to have advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage to this one is the fact that because you are canceling phase with this particular one, it will kind of mess with the function of your presence control. So as you turn that down, you may notice that your presence control becomes more or less useful, but that's going to be the only real side effect to this type. And some people don't even notice it at all. It's not an issue for them. They don't notice it as being an issue. So we're going to, and they can also just compensate by turning the presence control to a different point after they've set their overall output volume. So this is the one that we're probably going to go with here, as it has the in this situation, as it has the best advantages for our current situation. This might be a good one to look into, but again, you're going to have, when you turn this pot right here, you're going to have a whoosh, whoosh, whoosh sound, because you've got about 50 volts of DC on this pot, so it has that side effect. This one also is a little bit more difficult to install. You have to remove some original components in order to do it. And in an amp like this, where returning it to originality at some stage way down the road, if somebody wanted to do that, might be a thing. It could be best to just go ahead and go with this one, because this would be also the easiest to reverse. So those are the 4 types of master volumes that are discussed in these Trainwreck pages, and the advantages and disadvantages. Let's go ahead and, like I said, I think we're going to install type number 3. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to need a 1 meg audio taper pot and a couple of leads. Let's go ahead and procure those. Another thing that's worth noting about these post-phase inverter master volumes is that in this case, the type 1, and also in the case of the Type 2, if you have a bad potentiometer, or in this case, if you have a bad pot or a capacitor even, you're going to lose bias on the output tubes, which is going to cause massive problems. So you're basically putting more components in the line that can go bad and that can take out other things. Whereas with this one, all this is doing is just blending the 2 sides together. So this is a much safer way to do this as well, where it's not going to destroy something later on if one of the components that you install goes bad. So that's something to consider also. If you guys watch the other videos that I put up on this amplifier, I put a couple of videos up, and you can go back and watch those. I'll leave links in the description, but this had an additional output jack installed that just really didn't need to be here. That was just a crazy, just a lunatic kind of a thing that was put here. So we're going to remove this. This is not factory anyway, so we have no problems with removing this, and there's already a hole there, so we're not going to have to put an extra hole in order to install our 1 meg pot there. Okay, because this mod is going to be in the signal path, I'm going to use some shielded multi-conductor wire here to run this length. Okay, there it is. It doesn't look super pretty flying up like that, but that's really the best place for it. It gets it up over everything and out of the way of everything. It's not going to touch anything. It's not going to get hit either by anything. If you went underneath the board, it probably could have been done just fine, but it would have taken a little bit longer of a route, and frankly, it would have possibly come into contact with some of these wires over here, and also some of the filament wires, which we wanted to try to avoid. So I think going this route, it's more direct. It doesn't look as good, but you know, I mean, what are looks when you're never going to be in the thing anyway. So anyway, so that is how to install a post-phase inverter master volume in a Marshall, at least the Type 3 post-phase inverter master volume. Okay, let's check this thing out. Right now I've got the master volume fairly low.